I backed away from that dam for the first time. And I let go. I think, other than when I first prayed and read the Bible and read the Book of Mormon and first got to know God and first got to know of His love, that was really the first time I'd let go. When I went on a mission and I served God and I told people about God's love for them, that was the second time in my life I let go. And beginning in the middle of 2013, that was the third time I started to let go again. That was a time where the words of Jesus Christ as He lay in agony in the Garden of Gethsemane before He was betrayed by Judas, and He was pleading with God, those words became very real to me at that time. And I started to ponder them a lot, where He says, "Not my will, but thine be done." Because for so many years, I was really following my will, thinking it was God's will, but it was my will. I was lying to people. That was my choice. I was fighting against my essence, my being. That was my choice. I was determined to make sure that what I wanted was going to happen. And the more I pushed for it and the harder I tried, the more I was losing my sanity. And it became very dark. But as I began to let go, and as I began to think about what is God's will, things became much easier. Not at all. It became easier because I finally found grace. All that grace I had prayed for, that's when I really started to find it. I really, truly started to find God's grace in my life. Something I don't deserve. A tender mercy that I know I don't deserve because I am an obstinate, stubborn, angry person sometimes. And I am nasty. And I'm vile. And I'm so prideful. And I have so many flaws. And I don't deserve grace. None of us deserve grace. But God gave me grace. And it was because I opened my heart. God can't give us grace. God can't give us gifts if we don't accept them. We have to accept God's gifts. It's the only way God can give gifts. And the greatest gift of all is the grace of God. And He began to pour it into my life to such an extent that I began to study what are other people going through? And I began to watch videos like the one I'm making about people coming out. I began to hear people's testimonies. I began to research other people's experiences, Christian or otherwise, about coming out, about how they view their lives as gays or lesbians or transgendered. I began to really research that in earnest, and I still didn't want it. I still fought against it so hard. I did not want to believe it. I did not want to buy into it. I thought they were all deceived. I knew, I almost convinced myself somehow they were all deceived, but the more and more and more and more I heard, and I saw their eyes, and I heard their voices, I felt the Spirit so strong. And for me, that was the first time, beginning in late 2013 and early 2014, that was the first time I had felt the Spirit in many, 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 many years. That was the first time God had answered my prayers. That was the first time God was even talking to me. The heavens were shut, and there were no angels, and there was no voice of God, and there was no Spirit for a long time. And that was the first time I began to feel it again, and I began to hear God's voice again, and I began to feel my heart fill with the love of God again. And it didn't make sense to me. Why would I be feeling God's love, and why would I be feeling God's Spirit listening to a bunch of supposed sinners? And I pondered a lot about that, and I meditated a lot about that. I had moved to Colorado in the fall of 2013, and I was living by myself. This was, a time where it was good for me to be by myself. Generally, it's not good for me to be by myself. I'm an extrovert. But I was by myself, and I think God wanted me to be by myself because I think God wanted me to meditate, and he wanted me to go into the wilderness, just like Jesus did, just like Moses did, just like John the Baptist did, just like all great prophets have done. You need to go into the wilderness alone to be able to have the silence in order to find God's voice. And I did. And the more I pondered about it, I decided that the words of James in the New Testament applied to me just as much as they apply to anybody who reads them. That if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. And it goes on in the next verse, and it says, but let him ask with faith. And I know I'm paraphrasing. I didn't quote it probably exactly, but I had always believed in that scripture. I'd always believed that you can ask God anything. All of us have a personal relationship with God. All of us can talk to God. And if we doubt anything, if we have questions about anything, we can ask God, and God will give it to us as long as we have faith. And the faith that I had at that time was, I will let this go, and I will ask 3 questions, telling God openly that I will accept any answer he gives me. The first question was, God, do you want me to continue to manage or cope or fight or whatever term you want to use against this feeling or against homosexuality? Do you want me to continue to do that and then find a good, righteous young Mormon girl and get married in the temple? And I apologize if I'm sounding cynical. I asked it with much more sincerity at the time. So I asked that. And I sat for a few minutes. And I listened. And I felt my heart. And I felt my mind. And I felt my body. And there was nothing. There was just the empty stillness of my apartment. Nothing. So my second question, God, do you want me to continue to manage or cope or fight or whatever term you want to use against these homosexual feelings and live a celibate life? Meaning to never be with anyone sexually or romantically or intimately or as a partner. And I felt nothing again. There was nothing. And it was deathly, deathly quiet. And not just physically, it was deathly quiet inside my being, inside my mind and my heart and my spirit. And every single one of those questions I was afraid of asking, because I knew that the result of any of those questions was going to come with some kind of hardship. Either I would be alone for my whole life and never experience partnering, never experience waking up next to someone I love, never experience, just being with my best friend. Not only sexually, but to have a real household together, to share things, to laugh and go on trips and even do things boring like go to the grocery store. I would never have that. Or I would be with someone who I was worried I wouldn't be able to fully love because I wouldn't be able to couple with her in a way that she deserves. I was worried that I would continue, no matter how well God equipped me to cope and whatever strengths He gave me, there would still be tribulations, and I was worried that it was going to be very taxing and very wearisome for both of us, whoever that girl may have been. The third question scared me as well, because I knew that the answer to that question would likely result in possible excommunication and ostracization, alienation. That's the easier word to say. From the only culture, the only community I'd ever known in my entire life, since the day I was born. And from my family as well. There was a great possibility that if the third answer was what God answered affirmatively to, I might be kicked out, I might be disowned, I might never be able to talk to my family. And we are not a perfect family, and we have a lot of dysfunctions. And I would probably say that I am the black sheep or the rainbow sheep or the different sheep, the queer sheep. I'm the sheep that sometimes stirs things in the sheep pen with my family. But they're still my family. I didn't choose them and they didn't choose me, but we're still linked together. We're still family. And I didn't want to lose that. But I did need to ask that third question, and I did. I asked God, do you affirm of me as your gay son? And do you want me to seek a righteous, good man to start a life with? That was the first time since I had been much, much younger that I had a testimony building experience again. I had a very comforting feeling come over me. I had a very warm, very loving feeling come over me. One that communicated an extreme amount of tenderness and compassion like I said before, one that was love. The trademark feeling that I had felt other times in my life, knowing that God is love, and I was feeling that love extremely powerfully. And beyond that, I heard the words, I affirm of you as my gay son, and I want you to be happy. And so, despite my fears, and despite my hesitations, I followed through with my promise with God, because I had promised him in that prayer before I asked any one of those 3 questions, Lord, this cup is really bitter, and I would not drink it if it were my will. But it's not my will that I'm worried about anymore. I want to do thy will. Thy will be done. And I will follow through with whatever you tell me to do. Because I want to connect with you again. I want to have you in my life. I want you to be a guiding factor in my life again, because I've missed it. I've missed it so much. And God answered. And so I followed through with the answer to the 3rd question. And I slowly went through the process of coming out. First to some very trusted friends, then to my most trusted sibling, and then other siblings followed after that. And then eventually I came to the decision that I didn't want to talk on the phone or even want to talk in person to my parents, because somehow I had convinced myself that they were going to disown me, and I didn't want to be there when that happened. I was afraid. And so I wrote a letter, and I explained all of this, the same thing I'm explaining to you. I talked about being 5. I talked about being 13. I talked about being a missionary. I talked about the lies I told to myself and to everyone else. I apologized for those lies. I apologized for not being authentic and not being sincere. And I told them that God had told me He loves me. He affirms of me as His gay son. And that He wants me to find someone to start a life with. A good, wholesome, righteous man to start a life with. And beyond that, I didn't know anything else. I couldn't account for the discrepancy between what I was saying and church doctrine. I couldn't account for, why, they believe something different. I couldn't account for why most people in my community and my culture believe something different. I told him I don't have those answers. I know one thing, and I know one thing only, and it is that God affirms of me as His gay son. He loves me, and He wants me to start a life with a man that is wholesome and righteous and good and worthwhile of my high standards. And that's all I knew. And that's what I was going to do. And that's what I did.